you would be hard-pressed to find a department today that didn't say they practice community policing. Community policing is simply an approach to the delivery of police services that includes building relationships and solving the problems of the people that you serve. If community policing is the department's operating philosophy, then there is a commitment to building relationships across the board, to delivering your services in a way that the community helps define. And out of that comes a sense of relationship and a recognition of sort of the common humanity of both the officer and the citizen they serve. It was the norm for a very long time that if the community or a neighborhood held a meeting, that officers from a community relations section or whatever it was called in the department were the ones who attended that meeting. One of the changes I made as a police chief, for example, was to say that the officers who worked patrol in a given neighborhood should be the ones to attend that meeting. The lieutenant who was in charge of that geographic area should attend that meeting, so that the officers formed relationships with the people that they were serving. And it helped them recognize that it was part of their job to build that relationship. The role that community policing can play is to provide a venue where people can come together. And it's easy to hate somebody or something that you don't know. It is much more difficult to hate somebody or something that you've had face-to-face contact with. Something like the Not in Our Town project is really a step in the direction of challenging departments across the country to think about what community policing means to them in a very different way, which address an issue, a community issue of significance of hate crimes, for example, in a way that puts a human face on the police and marries the police up to this idea that there are social, sort of social constructs that are important to engage in. The challenge in collecting hate crime data is that in order to classify something as a hate crime, you have to be able to identify the motive of the suspect. Did a robbery occur because the suspect wanted money or whatever property the victim had, or did the robbery occur because the victim was, in a certain ethnicity or a certain sexual orientation or whatever? One of the things that I did as the police chief was challenge my detective commanders to review these cases, particularly assaults and robberies, to see whether or not there was any indication in the reporting or in the language that suggested it was a hate crime. Because very often a victim who may have been maybe focused on, the person hit me and took my wallet, and may sort of forget about the fact that the person used an ethnic slur in the process. That kind of information, if it doesn't make it into the police report, will then almost inevitably ensure that the incident is not classified as a hate crime. The capturing of hate crime data, in my opinion, should be looked at as a symptom of community health, and not simply collected for its own sake. I think that what departments really need to focus on is encouraging people to report crimes. Crime in general is underreported. You can then train the police officers and the police detectives to ferret out the issues of whether or not it was a hate crime. The really, as I said earlier, the really obvious ones are going to jump out. If you have created a climate where people, regardless of their circumstance, regardless of what their background is, know that they can freely come to the police department and report, and whatever the circumstances were, not be judged, not be trivialized, not be dealt with in a condescending fashion, then people will report crimes and the data will respond accordingly. I think that the worst part of being a victim, particularly a victim of an assault or an attack on your essence as a person, for want of a better term. As a rape victim told me one time, she felt like a thing. I think that sometimes people who are victims of hate crimes feel like things, like objects, like they don't count. And so the whole issue of restorative practice and making them whole really transcends simply taking the report or arresting the suspect, but somehow helping them reintegrate back into the fabric of the community. The police have to be part of a larger city effort, finding common places of interaction, and whether that's community gatherings, whether that's some neighborhood block parties, those kind of social events that occur outside the crisis environment. It is absolutely critical, that issue of knowing the other. I think somebody said, you have to know the other. You can hate the other if you don't know them. But once you get past that. The second thing, and more directly, that the police can do when they do have a hate crime, it has to be taken very, very seriously. It has to be focused on and acted upon. If a person thinks that or suggests that they have been assaulted because they are, fill in the blank, that should not be dismissed. If the victim feels dismissed, their desire to continue with the process of filing the report and going to court and doing all the things that come from that is very likely going to be diminished. And so strengthening that victim's resolve is a critical role for the police. There's a huge sort of groundswell of change, both cultural and economic. And I think that this issue of hate crime and this issue of recognizing our common humanity in that, and the role that the police play in maintaining social order in the most constructive sense of that term, is as critical as it's ever been.